Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to our Insider Insight Show. I am honored to have back with me someone who I believe is one of the best investigative journalists in the world, Corey Lynn. Every time she comes on our platform, I am inundated with requests of getting Corey back ASAP. Well, I'm honored to have her back today. She also goes by Corey Diggs is her website. Corey Corey Diggs.
With an S, Corey's Diggs, actually.
Oh, Corey's. Oh, I'm sorry. Corey's Diggs. I can't even read my writing. Corey'sDiggs.com. A little background on Corey Diggs was created by investigative journalist Corey Lynn for the purpose of digging for truth in a world where nothing is as it seems. And every day that goes by, that statement actually becomes even more factually correct, if you will, or even more appropriate. Then connecting the dots and presenting her findings to you. Corey focuses on larger webs and nests in areas that are seldom covered by what I call the bought-off lamestream fake media. She exposes operations, oftentimes with detailed timelines, maps, and documentation to provide the full scope of what might be transpiring. It's my honor to welcome back Corey Lynn. Corey, welcome back to the Insider Insight Show and the Operation Freedom platform.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. I haven't been here in a little while.
Yeah, it's been about, I think, a couple, 3-4 months.
Yeah. I've done a lot of reports since then.
You have, and I want to focus on a couple right now because there is something that has transpired that you have talked about that the bought-off lamestream fake media not just has not touched, but will never touch.
Right.
And I want to talk about what you just did on these characters. Nader-Khawaja, the Clintons, Pope Francis, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and South Africa, and how it's all one big linked pie. Educate our listeners, Corey.
Yeah, so it was really interesting because I had started working on a report pertaining to South Africa. I was observing a lot of elites going there. I could feel something was brewing. So I started looking into it, started documenting some timelines, and literally less than 48 hours later, this indictment hits. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's George Nader. I got to look into this because I've covered him in the past. I had done a report on his connections with the Clintons as it pertained to many affiliations they have with child pedophiles and, child traffickers. So I pulled it up, started reading through the press release from the Department of Justice. And the first thing that caught my eye was Ahmed, which goes by Andy Khawaja, is the CEO of Allied Wallets. And I thought, excuse me, they're funneling this money from the UAE, through George Nader, through Andy Khawaja's company, Allied Wallets, into political committees to basically give millions of dollars to Hillary Clinton for the presidential campaign in 2016. And that I didn't even finish reading the press release. I immediately start searching Allied Wallets to see what's going on there and what connections they have, because my first thought was, oh my God, this is a money laundering front for the elite, the deep state. And sure enough, I found connections and I start putting together this timeline. So what's interesting is, and like you said, the mainstream's not going to cover this because, my God, this implicates Hillary in accepting foreign funding for a presidential campaign, which is totally illegal. And of course, there's always deniability, but I got to believe they're bringing her into, I don't know how this investigation's rolling out exactly, but they would have to bring her in for questioning on this, would they not?
One would think so. But after reading the IG report, right? You know what, Corey? If anyone that we know and respect was in the Department of Justice or running the FBI, she would be one of the first people through the door.
Right. Well, and what's funny is they've been investigating the Trump campaign and funds there and everything, which, of course, as soon as these folks realized Hillary wasn't going to win, then as soon as she lost, they gave $1 million to the inaugural fund to Trump because they were trying to play both sides.
Right.
They wanted Hillary. That was their goal. So at any rate, what's interesting is I start looking back at the timeline and I see, okay, so in 2015, allegedly George Nader and Nader-Khawaja met for the first time in the UAE. Now, later that year in December, there's a report and there's a photo of them together, of Nader-Khawaja and Hillary Clinton together in Los Angeles, where they had a private meeting together.
Yeah, it looked pretty chummy in that. Yeah, you had the picture.
Yeah,
that's pretty chummy.
6 months later, they start funding her. Now, this isn't just donations rolling through. We're talking private parties. They're referring to her. I mean, if you go through and you read this 64-page indictment like I did, and you read all the WhatsApp messages back and forth, they're calling her, Big Sister H and the big lady and the big lady's husband, and we're going to go meet with him, and we're going to have a private party over here, and we want just the 4 of us, and we're going to do this fundraising event, but we're going to need more baklava, which represents money. So, I mean, this is very serious stuff, and there's no way in hell Hillary was not aware of this and part of this because, as you know, they've had very strong ties. The Clintons have had very strong ties to the UAE for decades. And they've received millions of dollars in, Bill going over and doing speeches, and they've received millions to their Clinton Foundation. So they're very tied in. And what I started noticing, because I had already been working on who all was going over to South Africa and what was happening there. Then I noticed this connection, how the Pope ties into this. I thought, wasn't this interesting? So Andy, I'm going by memory here. I actually have it in front of me, but it's easier for me to just kind of roll out through memory. So Andy then gets nominated by or appointed by Chuck Schumer.
Yeah, good old Chuck steps into this too. Yeah.
As the what was it called? It was the Commission on International Religious Freedom.
Yeah, right.
This term that's running through May of 2020. Now, what people need to understand is Allied Wallets, this company, it's kind of like a PayPal service in a way. I mean, it's like a channel for online service for sending money through across multiple countries. They operate out of, I think it's 164 countries. So keeping that in the back of your mind while we're talking about this. So in June 2018, Schumer appoints him to that position. Then in August, just a couple months later, he's awarded with this Medal of Goodness from the Vatican. From the Vatican. I'm like, what? So then in December, just a few months later, he's over there, and I have a picture in here from his Instagram where he's at the Vatican, he's meeting with the Pope, and he's being blessed and honored as an ambassador for peace. And the Pope, they report that the Pope was showing his gratitude for Khawaja's efforts in supporting children in need and his work with world leaders to spread peace.
How special.
Now, so think about this. So we already have the Clintons, the UAE, George Nader's been an advisor to the Middle East, high-level leaders for decades. And now we have this Andy character. And in February, just 2 months after that, exactly 2 months to the day, actually, from him getting that award, all of a sudden the Pope goes over to the UAE to meet with them. For the first time ever that a Pope has gone to the Arabian Peninsula.
No, it's pure coincidence, Corey.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
No.
So there are bigger things afoot here, and I can't pretend to know everything that these people are planning, but in my eyes and my research, this all very much centers around some stuff going down in South Africa. And we just had, so just some examples. Russia and China have teamed up with South Africa, and we're running naval drills off the coast. Just, I don't have the date in mind here. That was recently, though. That was this year. And we have the UAE, who's they've been building relationships with South Africa for quite some time. In fact, they formalized this in 1994 when they went over for Nelson Mandela's inauguration, which Hillary Clinton, of course, was in attendance at as well. Mm-hmm. So they just recently, in June of this year, the UAE committed $10 billion to the South African economy. And so while they're working over there, in September, the Pope travels to Madagascar, Mozambique, and how do you say that? Is it Mauritius?
I think Mauritius.
Mauritius? Okay, so he travels over there, and I just have to read this quote, because on his way back, he had a press conference on the plane, and he says, I would like to repeat what the doctrine of the church says about this. When we acknowledge international organizations and we recognize their capacity to give judgment on a global scale, for example, the International Tribunal in The Hague or the United Nations, if we consider ourselves humanity, when they make statements, our duty is to obey.
Oh.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes...
Well, spoken like a good globalist.
What's that?
Spoken like a good globalist.
Exactly. So, yeah, in true 2030 agenda fashion. So, so then he gets back, and 2 days later, he issues a statement inviting world leaders and young people to gather at the Vatican in May 14th, 2020, for this event called Reinventing the Global Education Alliance, where he said it's a global education pact is needed to educate us in universal solidarity and a new humanism. And I mean, it's there's a lot of information there, but he quotes this African proverb about how it takes a whole village to educate a child, which, you know, Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village.
Right.
And so there's all these little things, and then in the meantime, I forgot to mention, when he met over in the UAE in February, they signed this joint declaration called Human Fraternity and World Peace for Living Together. And I have the links to all these documents for anyone who wants to read all the context in here. It's quite a lot of information. So in the meantime, while this is going on, well, that was September 12th, actually. So 2 weeks later, he goes and gives a speech before the United Nations General Assembly, which is the first time that a pope spoke at the annual session where all member countries were represented. And again, he brings up the 2030 Agenda. He says the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the World Summit, which opens today, is an important sign of hope. I am similarly confident that the Paris Conference on Climate Change will secure fundamental and effective agreements. So for those who don't know, I'm sure many do, the Pope has a lot of people in his ear. As far as I'm concerned, he's got a lot of handlers. They are population control con men. They are the climate hoax con men. They are for, abortion. And he's brought these people in to speak before at events. Like you got Jeffrey Sachs, Ban Ki-moon. I mean, these are the people that push this. And if you start reading between the lines and you read a lot of their documentation on their alleged sustainable development for this 2030 agenda, it's really about a one world governance.
Yep.
It's really about, one world, new world order, one world governance, and no borders, and basically socialist run, where the United Nations is kind of running the show. So then in addition to that, we have like all within a couple of months, within the past couple of months, we have Meghan and Harry going over to South Africa, and then she returns, and 2 months after she returns, you have Hillary Clinton visiting Meghan at her home in Windsor. We've got Bill and Melinda Gates, which have long been, and the Clintons too, they've long been exploiting Africa. But there's just been this strong focus in South Africa, a lot in the Cape Town area. And you have Richard Branson, who just opened up his second business there about entrepreneurship down in Cape Town. And of course, we already know he owns thousands of acres there.
And remember,
as well.
we also had Oprah involved in Africa as well. Remember that? With her schools?
Yeah. And I'm not sure, was that Kenya? I'm not sure which area that was. I didn't mention her in here just because I was kind of focused in that South Africa area there. But there's, and then we have Jack Dorsey
Good old
Twitter,
Twitter, yeah.
who's saying that he's going to move there next year
Right.
for a little while because they're trying to build up technology over there. And that's another thing too. While China's getting involved with that, so there's this big boom happening, and they've got hundreds of thousands of people, well, millions of people online over there, and they're trying to get more online. And so they're coming in and they're bringing these services, such as Nader-Khawaja just locked in a contract working with the government over there, trying to get his online payment system set up over there. So, I mean, you see these people in the same circles over and over, going in and taking over. And what's interesting while this is happening is we have, the government doing these land grabs, and we hear all this talk about the white people being murdered or white farmers being murdered.
A genocide.
Yes. And I can't help but wonder, and I did speak with someone I know who lives over in Africa, because I feel like whereas some of that may have happened, I feel like there is a big propaganda campaign going on where they're trying to deter people and force people out and scare people from coming in because they're building whatever it is they're building over there, whatever it is this game is that they're working on. I think it goes way beyond just, exploiting the land or the minerals or all that good stuff. I really think there's something afoot happening here.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so I feel like there's a little bit of over-exaggeration propaganda going on there. So it's quite interesting, and I would love to see where this is going to go as far as Hillary Clinton being called in, and if that's ever going to happen. It's just mind-boggling.
Well, and here's the thing. When they did a little reporting on this Nader character, and they immediately linked him to Trump, not Hillary.
Oh, I know.
Right?
Every single headline was
right.
Donor to Trump and Clinton.
Right.
And they just totally downplayed this.
But he donated, I think, wasn't he involved? The amount of money they had donated was close to $4 million, wasn't it, to Hillary?
Yes.
That they were laundering through?
Yes. And
this Nader guy, this is what, and tell me if your information is different, but part of his rap sheet dates back to the 80s. He pled guilty in 1991 to a federal child porn charge involving footage of 13 and 14-year-old boys, received a 6-month sentence, served in a Baltimore halfway house. And then, when he got hit with this latest thing that you talked about on December 3rd, 2019...
Yeah.
He was already in federal custody on other charges. In July 2019, he was charged with sex trafficking for allegedly transporting a 14-year-old boy from Europe and then abusing him, of which he pled not guilty in an Alexandria, Virginia court.
Right. Well, and in 2003, you didn't hit on Prague, did you?
No.
And that, okay, because I was just quickly scrolling through. Okay, so in 2003... he was convicted in Prague for corruption of minors, sexual abuse, and impairing minors. He had sexually abused 10 boys. So this went far beyond pornography. And he served some time there, and then he came back to D.C. And so what are your thoughts on this? So I find it hard to believe that the Trump campaign would allow this guy to come in. And I understand he's been an advisor to the Middle East. The guy's, well connected and could set up meetings and whatnot. I just feel like there's this honey trap. Like they had to know this background, and they had to know that they were funneling money to the Clintons, and so they just kind of allowed this to play out. I don't know. I just find it all very bizarre.
Well, and didn't Robert Mueller at one point? Wasn't he investigated, or wasn't he? He
was questioned.
He was questioned by Mueller's team, right?
Yes. So he was given partial immunity, And he was questioned when they were looking into the whole Russian hoax. And he was questioned about meetings he had helped set up for Trump Jr. and with Eric Prince. And so he was given partial immunity. And at that time, I believe they had his phones. So they would have known about the child pornography, I believe. Mm-hmm. And they probably would have seen the WhatsApp messages with Hillary Clinton too, I would suspect.
Right.
So the charges, it was almost like it was put in place actually when Mueller was in, if I look at the timeline, for as far as the pornography goes. And that was kind of like put on the back burner, and they didn't bring him in until June of this year for that. Mm-hmm. And, and then all of a sudden this was kept very hush hush. This indictment that was unsealed, I mean, we didn't see any leaks really come out about this. No. So yeah. And not only that, so Allied Wallets also has a history. They've had to settle twice with the Federal Trade Commission over laundering money for illegal websites. So Nader-Khawaja had to forfeit $13 million in 2009, and then just this May, him and two of his officers settled with the FTC for knowingly processing fraudulent transactions for firms that were known by law enforcement agencies as fraudulent. But it went beyond that. They literally created fake foreign shell companies, dummy websites, and other false information to hide this from banks and credit card networks. So that's all like very carefully constructed scheming there. And so this that just came out, I mean, the fact of the matter is these people have been busted twice already for laundering money and setting up shell companies, and now they're meddling in a presidential election. So operating out of 164 companies, and this guy Andy is very well connected in a lot of countries with a lot of leaders. So you just got to wonder how long, his company was formed in 2005. How long and how many times has he done similar things like this for a leader deep state, funneling money from country to country?
Well, we're going through this whole impeachment goat rodeo, right? Where it's about getting foreign influence to influence an election, blah blah blah.
Right.
Look, if you connect the dots, and tell me if I'm wrong, Corey, with Nader-Khawaja, the Clintons, UAE, South Africa, Allied Wallet, his company. There's a whole lot of money happening here that could have been laundered from foreign countries through these characters.
Right.
And I think that's what they're talking about here, aren't they, when they talk about this $4 million that came through?
Oh yeah. And they don't specify in the indictment. So Nader was reporting back to, they say, a foreign official, I think they call it foreign country one. Well, in looking at past Mueller reports and connecting all these dots, it's the UAE. Mm-hmm. So even though Nader was working with both Saudi Arabia and the UAE with this, he was reporting back there. So yeah, absolutely. And
there are ties you have in your articles with Billy Boy Clinton, wasn't it? A meeting with the principals in the UAE in their administrations?
Yeah, in fact, he just recently, gosh, I don't have the date in memorized here. He just last year? Trying to find that. He had a meeting. Well, they've had numerous meetings with the Clintons. They've supported the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation for a very long time. But just on, here it is. Okay. Just last year, February 22nd, 2018, Bill Clinton met with Mohammed bin Zayed oh boy, I'm just going to butcher the name. I don't know how you say his last name, Nahyan, who's the Deputy Supreme Commander of the United Arab Emirates, which is the very one that George Nader had been reporting back to and funneling this money to Clinton. So Bill Clinton meets with him February 22nd, and they say to review an array of issues of mutual concern. I just have to chuckle at that.
Well, right. Yeah. Or gosh only knows where that goes, right?
Right. So yes, they knew, and I'll be keeping my eyes on this to see what comes of this.
What do you think? Before we leave this, South Africa. Mm-hmm. Why are all the bees buzzing around South Africa? Do you believe? What do you think is going on under the hood in South Africa?
I don't know. There's been a lot of speculation. You could say, yeah, they're moving in and they're taking over all the land and they're going to profit off it. And you've got all the minerals there. You've got, some people have talked about the climate cooling down, and so they're setting up agriculture over there and they're going to control food production. I've not investigated that angle. It's, and then you got the government doing the land grabs and stuff. So, which these people all work with them. Mm-hmm. So it's I just personally feel like there's something else.
Yeah, that's not, you know what? I mean, that's bad enough, but it's not creepy enough.
Right. And then you've got...
Because these are creeps.
Right. And so then you have just, in South Africa, kind of, it's like south west of Johannesburg and, northeast of Cape Town there. They've got all this land where 13 nations are working together to set up these satellite dishes. And they're also going to be setting up, so it's going to be thousands of satellite dishes scattered about the land. And then on the west coast of Australia, they're setting up 1 million, they call them like antenna sticks. And they're creating this massive, some of it's already in place. They already have a telescope, they already have some of the dishes, but they're going to be really kicking up the construction, I believe, in, it may start next year, but definitely 2021. And so I can't even speak intelligently on it because I couldn't find enough information, scientific information, to explain it really. But I do have it in here, and I have links in here, and it's supposed to be like the largest in the world, the most powerful, so they can study the star system and I don't have it in front of me right now. It's to me, that's, I don't know, there's something going on with that.
Yeah, there's something that's just not right there.
Yeah.
I mean, really bad there.
Yeah. And my friend who lives over in Africa is on the same page. She's been trying to figure out what the heck's going on too.
Let's turn to your most recent series, which is on transgender, exploiting transgenders. Educate our listeners, because that series is absolutely fantastic. Very troubling, Corey.
It is. And
really troubling.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back and pinpoint when the social engineering started in the U.S. And so what I did is I broke this into 4 parts. And part 1 gets into the social engineering, and part 2 gets into the medical engineering. Mm-hmm. Part 3 is the profiteers and the funders. And part 4 is showing the stage we're in right now, which is the sales and marketing push to try and basically we're in this final stage. Like, a lot of people think that we're still in this normalization state and that they're trying to normalize this, and we're in the social engineering phase. We're way past that. And when I found that, that's when I said, I got to report on this. People don't understand how far gone this already is. Mm-hmm. So what we have is they created, okay, when I say they, I mean, there's a lot of people involved here, from scientists to media to Hollywood, the typical deep state conglomerate there. Mm-hmm. So what they did is they began the social engineering back in the 50s, and I take you through a timeline bringing up to present, showing this, and showing who all was involved and how they did this and carried this out. And it started with Christine Jorgensen, which was George Jorgensen, that was in the Army, drafted into the Army, World War II at age 19. went over to Denmark to get special permission to have the surgery, transition surgery done, was then lived in New York. So then when he flew back to New York and got off the plane, the New York Times, and was it the New York Post, I believe, or the New York Daily Post? I don't have it in front of me. Both of them glamorized it in the headlines. Hollywood embraced her, and they immediately began with bringing her into cabaret, and people will yell at me for calling her she, but the name is Christine Jorgensen. That's what you're going to find everywhere. So I'm just saying she. So they glamorized her and got into cabaret, into film, was buddy-buddy with everyone in Hollywood. And then in the 70s started going to all the university campuses and advocating for transgenders. And that opened it up. And as time went on, you have different agencies getting involved, and the medical engineering starts. And in 1969, you've got scientists that did a study on British girls. There was like 100 and something British girls where they said they determined that if a girl is, should hit puberty at age 11. If she starts hitting puberty at age 8 or younger, then that's precocious puberty. Mm-hmm. So, and the same thing with boys. With boys, it's age 9. If it's early, before age 9. And I'm looking at this going, okay, so what is their definition exactly of precocious puberty? And what is the central precocious puberty? Because what I was seeing was these puberty blockers being given to children who allegedly have gender dysphoria. And so I wanted to understand where this term central precocious puberty even came from, and why puberty blockers, injecting hormones into children even came about. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what I discovered was, if you go into any of the medical websites, you'll see that central precocious puberty is basically a made-up disorder that says if your child starts to go through puberty a few years earlier than some of their friends, well, then that's not right. Let us fix that. Let us cure that. Let's inject them with hormones to slow that down.
Slow it down, yeah.
And because what might happen, and I'm waiting for some riveting like, oh my God, this is going to affect their bones or their organs. No, it affects your stature, your height. So a child could have this quick growth spurt, and then it'll slow down, and they'll end up being maybe on the shorter end of the spectrum, maybe. And they say, well, they could have social and emotional scarring from this because they're embarrassed by going into puberty, showing signs of puberty before, like their breasts are enlarging. Maybe they get their period sooner. Maybe they're starting to show acne, that type of thing. Nothing life-threatening. But then what they do is to manipulate the minds of parents. They put in there, such as the Mayo Clinic, for example, that they don't know exactly what causes central precocious puberty. However, we have witnessed that children who have brain tumors or a central nervous system issue or a couple of other really scary things, that it could lead to central precocious puberty. So what that does, as you know, is it seeds the minds of the parents. So if a parent all of a sudden sees her daughter developing breasts or has acne, she says, oh my God, maybe she has a brain tumor. I better get her to the doctor. And then the doctors are all trained to say, oh, no, don't you worry. It's just central precocious puberty. We can fix that with hormones.
Right.
It's terrible. And
it is terrible.
And so what happened then is in the late 80s, the Salk Institute, Jonas Salk, who invented the polio vaccine, which is a whole other article I will be writing, along with scientists out of a New Orleans institute get together, and they discover is it GnRH gene? Am I saying that right?
No.
I don't have it in front of me. Okay. So what they do is they synthesize it and they create these analogs so that they can create puberty blockers to control and slow down the hormones. So the Salk Institute gets theirs patented and comes out with it in 1991. And the reason this is important is because if you look at the timeline, you will see this was very well planned out. These people plan decades in advance. That was, you could say, well, they created that as a fake disorder, which really has to do with vanity, so that they could make money on it. Okay, maybe true. I believe they also, more importantly, created it for their purpose of using it for gender dysphoria, which the FDA never licensed it for. So what we have is, in 2007, the Boston Children's Hospital creates the first gender youth clinic. We now have over 50. We've got Planned Parenthood, who's saying this is reproductive rights, that it's not a mental health issue. And they are now the second largest gender-affirming hormone therapy provider in the nation. So an 18-year-old can walk into Planned Parenthood and that same day have their blood drawn, talk to them, and get a prescription for hormones. And they say right on their website that you will be on hormones for the rest of your life, which we know also can sterilize. So with kids under 18, you have to have a parent or guardian, but they state on their website, you don't need to participate in therapy or provide information from a mental health provider to receive hormone therapy.